Hello everyone. Just wanted to go over a few things with your synthesis essay, the rough draft that you're still going to be working on this week. And the plan would still to have that rough draft check on Monday of next week. So that would be November the 20th, those 2 days before you have Thanksgiving break starting on Wednesday. One thing I did want to make sure, though, that everyone was clear about it. I didn't do a weekly syllabus for this week because I figured there would be too many factors that could kind of be changing the pace of things. You do have a literary term quiz this week. So your literary term quiz is going from the term diction, and it is going through essay. So if you take a look in your big course syllabus, we left off where we did chiasmus through dialect. So on the next page we have diction, and that is going through essay down here. So you do not have to know the different types of essay. We'll take care of that at a later time, and we're not going to do a literary term quiz for that 2-day week before Thanksgiving break. So literary term quiz number 4, that'll be the last one we do before Thanksgiving. One thing to make sure you are aware of, you have diction, as I said, going through essay, but you also do need to be aware of the term elegy as well as eulogy. So elegy is the official literary term. They make reference to eulogy. That is part of your literary term quiz that you'll have for this week. So any questions, let me know. It'll be on Wednesday as it normally is. I'm going to submit it through Google Classroom. So it's still going to be essentially kind of like a matching quiz. The setup of it will look a little bit different, but still the same idea. One word, one definition each. It's not sentence completion or examples or anything like that. So course syllabus, looks like that's page 28, diction going through essay. Okay. For your, and I'll just write up here to make sure that's perfectly clear that this is on Wednesday. For your synthesis rough draft in Google Classroom, you have the assignment that I set up on Friday where there is a template. I think that is a good idea for you to type your essay in the template. It's not something that you need to officially turn in to me, but that way I can kind of monitor progress, and if you do have questions throughout the course of the week, it gives me a way to kind of take a look at it. Also remember that in the sidebar here over on the left, number 2, the current unit synthesis, not only is the template there and the synthesis prompt, which we'll take a look at, but also all of the packets, the sources and things like that. So if you need a copy of Letter from Birmingham Jail for whatever reason, you don't have your physical copy with you, you can always pull up that copy from Google Classroom. So by all means, take a look at those things, as well as any of the other materials in here that would be useful. But civil disobedience is there, Letter from Birmingham Jail, vindication of the rights of woman, and then also the, looks like the photos are not there, so I will add the 2 visual sources for sure. That will be added. Your synthesis prompt, which we're certainly already familiar with, I know we've talked about those things. Just a couple little reminders as we've talked about synthesis essays. That first paragraph where Oscar Wilde gets mentioned, or that first part of the prompt where Oscar Wilde is mentioned, remember that's establishing the context. So we're taking a look at disobedience being man's original virtue, and it is disobedience that allows social progress to take place. So those are really the 2 terms that you want to be aware of, that you're going to have to kind of take a look at within your synthesis essay: disobedience and then also social progress and how those things work together. You know certainly that you're taking a look at 2 expository chapters from the Grapes of Wrath and then 3 other selections as well, to argue the extent to which Wilde's claims have been valid throughout the history of the United States. Remember, we made reference to have been valid means you're taking a look at both past and present. So the hope would be that starting today and really throughout the course of the week, you're able to kind of piece together a rough draft for Monday of next week. That if you are typing, I'm just going to put due Monday, November 20th. If you are typing your rough draft in that MLA template through Google Classroom, you do not need to print out a hard copy because then I'll have a digital copy of it. If you are not using the template, then I would need you to bring a hard copy to class. But I did want to go over a few things with everyone just to make sure that you have some ideas as to what you can do for the structure of the essay. So obviously that means that you have an introduction paragraph, and I know we did discuss some of these things before, but I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at some ideas that you could do. So I'm going to be typing in body paragraph number 1, if I can spell body paragraph. Body paragraph number 3, And I'm also going to put in body paragraph number 4. That does not mean that everyone is going to have 4 body paragraphs. Some folks might have 3. 3 would be the absolute minimum. 2 would not give you enough. Some folks might decide to have a little bit more than that. So that's going to be entirely up to you as it comes about to structuring your essay. I don't know why I hit that button. All right, so in your introduction, couple things, and these would just be some things to keep in mind while you're working. Make sure that you do have some type of attention grabber or hook. Stay away from your sources, though, when you are going for the attention grabber or the hook. All you want to do is make sure that you are establishing the relevance of the issue, which in this case is going to be both disobedience, and if you want to call it civil disobedience, depending upon the realm, the extent that you're going to, you can. It can be disobedience. Some of you might not be looking at civil disobedience and argue that violent disobedience is necessary. But disobedience and also social progress. Why, essentially, are these things important in today's world? As well as the past, since we're going to be kind of taking a look at both of those. So within your introduction, establish the context that you're going to be taking a look at. At this point, do not mention sources yet. There is no need to get involved with the synthesis sources. You don't need to introduce them. If you introduce the sources in the introduction, it feels like then that your argument is being tailored around those sources, where you are the one who's really certainly going to be kind of establishing the argument. So I don't want you to feel that you have to mention you're going to use Henry David Thoreau or Martin Luther King or any of the other sources. Simply at this point, you're just going to establish the relevance of the issue, disobedient social progress, within the context of the United States. Why are these things important in 2017? How has they been utilized in the past? If you want to mention Oscar Wilde and the quote, that's coming from the prompt, that's entirely optional. That's for you to decide. I think some people feel comfortable using it, kind of taking some ideas from the prompt and restating it. Others don't want to use Wilde's quote. I don't have a preference. Just make sure, though, that you are certainly kind of establishing the significance of disobedience and social progress. One last thing, and this probably would be with your attention grabber, but at any time within really the essay, not just the introduction, please do not use a dictionary definition for either disobedience or social progress. Again, the reason I want you to have ownership of the topic of the issue. If you're relying on Merriam-Webster Dictionary.com to kind of let us know what those terms mean, you're already now giving up ownership of the essay. These are up to you. Besides in an AP kind of setup, on an exam, you wouldn't have the ability to define those things using dictionary.com or a hard copy dictionary, whatever the case may be. So within your introduction, kind of start thinking about, to what extent do you agree with Wilde that it is important that disobedience leads to social progress? So it is absolutely critical that you make your claim. To what extent is Wilde correct? That is the ultimate decision that you're going to have to make. I know I mentioned referencing Oscar Wilde is optional. My guess is a lot of folks probably will in reference to the thesis statement, but you certainly don't have to use Oscar Wilde's name within the thesis statement. You could do something along the lines of throughout, again, spelling's a hard one. Apparently I'm doing it at home by myself. Throughout American history, public disobedience against, and you could decide if it's going against the government or some kind of larger concept, institution, authority, but public disobedience against the government undoubtedly leads to social progress. Again, this is a sample. I'm not saying this would be the issue or the claim that you would have to make, but that would be a clear thesis statement throughout American history. Public disobedience against the government undoubtedly leads, or really, I guess, throughout American history, public disobedience against the government has undoubtedly led to social progress, since we're taking a look at past and present. Some of you would be going, wait a minute, Mr. Kane, has is a to-be verb. This is true. At this point, I'm not worried about it. That might even be a to-be verb that I'll probably let you get away with, since it is getting used within the prompt itself anyway. So I don't want you worrying about that at this point. Also, for your rough draft, I'm not worried about to-be verbs or anything of that nature. The whole idea is try to get your argument down on paper. In body paragraph number 1, if this is me setting up my essay, I think it's important that I have to define my key terms. So here is where I would define both disobedience and social progress. I think it would, again, be a very wise idea for you not to worry about using dictionary.com. But what do you mean by disobedience within the context of your essay? Is disobedience going to be something along the lines of peaceful protest, civil disobedience? Or are you also going to be opening up to possibly more violent protests? What does it mean for social progress to occur? Is this the equal treatment of citizens? Is it allowing for fair representation in the government? Those are certainly things that you could think about and come up with. But this is where a lot of people's essays are going to be taking different angles, because disobedience, progress is going to mean very different things to very different people. Certainly when it comes to groups, individuals who might not feel that social progress has taken place, you could take a look at gender, you could take a look at race, religion, sexuality, etc. Age could be something. Maybe as a high school student, you don't feel that the social progress is there compared to adults. Minors not being treated the same way as adults and things of that nature. So the types of groups that you want to look at is absolutely up to you. At this point, I'm still not using sources. At this stage in the rough draft, I'm just coming up with my argument, so again, I still have the ownership there. For body paragraph number 2, excuse me, here is now where I want to pick a specific type of topic. And that topic is going to allow me to kind of stay focused. I could be doing something where I'm taking a look at past examples, since the prompt does mention about both past and present. I could be taking a look at specific groups of people, such we have mentioned up here: gender, race, religion, sexuality. Maybe you want to set something up where you take a look at disobedience has worked for gender issues, hasn't worked as well for race issues or sexuality, or whatever the case may be. That's up to you. Maybe you want to take a look where you're going to do past examples of specific groups, and then in another body paragraph, and I'll explain why I'm purposely skipping body paragraph number 3, then you would take a look at present examples. Maybe in past, you're taking a look at a specific subtopic, specific group, such as segregation, that was taking place, well, even slavery before the Civil War, and then Jim Crow laws, and civil rights movement throughout the 50s and 60s. Maybe today you want to take a look at more specific groups. Immigration certainly has been a hot topic over the last few years. So that could be some different groups that you want to take a look at. But I have it set up where here I have some past examples, here I have present examples. If you wanted to take a look at a specific group and it be both past and present for body paragraph number 2, and then you want to look at another separate group in body paragraph 4, it being both past and present, that would be an option. Again, there's a lot of flexibility. It's a complex essay, which gives you the freedom to do a lot of things. It's just making sure that you have some kind of structure overall to it. For body paragraph number 3, this is where I would suggest that you do your counter argument. Remember that this is a requirement based on the prompt that you have to have at least one counter argument paragraph. And so with the counter argument paragraph, what that means is that you would be disproving, oops, excuse me, didn't mean for that to be in bold, disproving a counter claim or explaining why your position is more valid. I'm going to get rid of that highlight, hopefully. There we go. So maybe there's a counter argument that you're saying civil disobedience, peaceful disobedience, is important in creating social progress throughout the United States. So you could do a counter argument that violent disobedience does not work. Maybe your argument is that in some cases, if civil disobedience is not working, there must be violent steps that have to be taking place. And so you could do an argument, a counter argument, where some may argue that you have to stop with civil disobedience and it can never become violent, but you could certainly take a look then at examples where you don't feel that that is the case. Again, this doesn't all have to be coming from the sources. You know, things that you've learned about in history class and things like that. Pennsylvania, the Whiskey Rebellion could be kind of an issue that folks might want to take a look at as a type of rebellion, and did it lead to social progress and things like that. The American Revolution in itself was certainly disobedience with the United States that went kind of beyond certainly being nonviolent. So you want to take a counter argument, a claim that someone would kind of have against you. Doesn't mean that they'd be saying your whole entire argument is false, but you would want to kind of disprove a counterclaim or explain why your position is more valid than that counterclaim. So examples of counterclaims: violent disobedience does not work. It simply could be that social progress has stagnated, essentially, that we have not had improvement in the United States in the last few years, decades, whatever. You could argue why this is true, why this is not true. You don't want your counter argument to be the last body paragraph, because I think the whole idea would be you want to end strong with your argument, developing your whole idea. So as you are developing your ideas, your examples, think what would be arguments against your position. And that's what your counter argument would be. My suggestion is that I would probably type this paragraph last, so you can allow yourself to focus on your argument, build it the way that you want, and then you could certainly insert the counter argument at a later time. I think in between your two main arguments for body paragraph 2 and 4 would be the ideal place for the counter argument. But again, this can kind of vary a little bit from individual to individual based on how the essay is being set up. So if you decide that you want the counter argument to be earlier or later, that's certainly a conversation that we could have and talk about. And keep in mind, your rough draft for the 20th, this is not saying this is how my essay is going to be. You might have your counter argument earlier, and then we decide to kind of slide it down a little bit. You can certainly use sources against one another with counter arguments, and maybe think that in some cases some folks go too far. Civil disobedience, Henry David Thoreau talks about peaceful protest. At the same time, it mentions, that government is best which governs least, or not at all. You could argue that, hey, there has to be some type of government or some type of rules, regulations. So, you could certainly disprove or discredit synthesis sources if you wanted to. I've mentioned I didn't want you to really use the synthesis sources yet. As you now have started to develop your argument, this is when you can figure out, okay, which sources now work best with the ideas that I am starting to present. When it comes to using your synthesis sources, I would recommend using what I would call the START method. And this is how to kind of transition into the sources. All START means is source, title, author, right verb, topic. It's kind of like a spa where you put these things together and it gives you a sentence. So, for example, in his essay, I've mentioned the source, civil disobedience, Henry David Thoreau criticizes the control the U.S. government has over its citizens. And I think even for the type of control we could take a look at would be, so for an example, financial control. So in his essay, I've identified the type of source. I've mentioned the title now. Do a little color coding here. Title being Civil Disobedience. Mentioning now my author, Henry David Thoreau. And all this is doing is making sure that I cover all of my bases when it comes to integrating the sources. I have a right verb. The verb that I'm doing is criticize, to stay away from show, even things like discuss and things of that nature. And then here I have the topic that I'm going to be taking a look at. I'm running out of colors to use. I guess we'll go with this one, which looks the same. So the topic, here I'll just make it bold, would be the financial control that the U.S. government has over its citizens. So the whole idea of using START is to make sure you do cover all your bases. A couple things. If you were to do something like letter from Birmingham jail, I would not go in his letter from Birmingham jail, but you might do in his response, letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr., responds to the Alabama clergyman or something like that. For the titles of your sources, civil disobedience, letter from Birmingham jail, those would be quotation marks like I have here. If you are doing, when you would use John Steinbeck, the grapes of wrath would be italicized, and also Mary Wollstonecraft, A Vindication of the Rights of Women would be italicized as well. If you do use Mary Wollstonecraft, this would be in her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women. It's not a novel. Novel means it's going to be a fictional piece, but hers is certainly nonfiction. So you would simply just go in her book. If you want to do publication, that would be fine as well. But anytime you're using sources, within a synthesis essay, the START method is a good way to kind of think about using the source, the title, the author, having the right verb, and then mentioning the topic. You certainly don't have to use this setup every single time, but it's a nice way to kind of cover your bases and make sure that you are properly introducing your argument. So the big part for you folks is certainly going to be advancing using evidence, specific examples, both from the sources but outside the sources when it comes to your body paragraphs, especially probably body paragraphs number 2 and number 4. You have to use the 4 sources. That doesn't mean 1 per body paragraph. Technically, it's 5, I suppose, since you have 2 from the Grapes of Wrath. The placement of them is up to you, but do not rely on the conclusion or the introduction as a way to use the sources. I think that those should be coming from the body paragraphs. It's going to be a little cheap if you're using those 2 paragraphs as a way to meet the source requirement. I certainly know you're going to still have questions as you're working through it. I think coming up with your position is probably going to be the most difficult part initially. Once you start writing it and feel a little bit of confidence with your ideas, I think they'll be okay from there. But it's just simply going to be getting started. So don't try to mess around with some ideas. Certainly the arguments can change a little bit, but think about really ultimately what is disobedience for you so far as how citizenry would react to government or some kind of higher authority. You could certainly think of protests and boycotts. Social media in today's world would certainly be a way where protests are taking place. But I think the term that sometimes gets forgotten about is social progress. So what does it mean for social progress to occur? How do you know when it does occur? That would be a big part of your argument. The conclusion, certainly, obviously providing closure to the whole argument. I think a big thing with the conclusion is make sure to reinforce and extend the relevancy of the argument to today's world and moving forward. So how can we take things that we've learned from Thoreau, Wollstonecraft, King, Steinbeck, others, and how could that kind of help us moving forward and hopefully continuing to have social progress? So hope I didn't take up too much time, but I want to kind of just go over some outlines, some structure, some things that might be kind of useful for you. So here is, again, this kind of setup. Feel free to come back to this video anytime that you want. Send me some emails throughout the course of the week if need be. I've started to take a look at the independent reading journals. Again, I'm hoping, and I'll send out a remind when they're done, but I'm hoping to have them completed sometime by Wednesday, so that still gives you some time to make any changes for this Friday's rhetorical analysis. For the rhetorical analysis journal, my expectation would be that most people are probably going to be taking a look at 2 devices. In some cases, you might go up to 3. 1 would not be enough, but certainly 2 devices I think would be appropriate. All right. If you have questions, send me an email. Looking forward to seeing you guys again. Hopefully Thursday or Friday, hoping to make it back, but I guess we'll just kind of have to play this one by ear. If you have any questions, let me know. Good luck. All right, take care.